How exactly did the world's first city dwellers meet such a violent end? We're dusting off a 5,000-year-old cold case today, one that's been buried deep in the desolate sands of modern-day Iraq. And honestly, it's a mystery that forces us to question the very foundations of human civilization itself. So let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer. We're launching a dark, deep investigation into the ancient Sumerian city of Ur, which is widely considered the heart of the world's very first empire. We're going to peel back the layers of this ancient weathered map, if you will, examining both the vibrant, incredibly advanced lives these people led and the chilling, macabre shadows they cast, shadows that are still very much visible today. 1,850. Just think about that number for a second. That is the massive number of burial sites a British archaeologist named Leonard Woolley excavated along with his team back in the 1920s. They were out there digging trenches in the middle of this desolate desert landscape at a site called Tel El Mukayyar. They ended up striking what became known as the Gold Trench, simply because they kept pulling up these breathtaking pieces of golden jewelry and pottery from the earth. Out of those thousands of burials, Woolley found 17 that were so elaborate he deemed them the royal tombs.
Now, to really wrap our heads around this, we have to look at the sheer scale of time we're talking about here. This timeline proves Ur wasn't just some fleeting temporary settlement. It started all the way back in the Ubaid period, roughly 3800 BC. By the 26th century BC, we see its first recorded king, Mesopotamia, step onto the scene. Then, jump to around 2040 BC, and the legendary king Ur-Nammu begins building the colossal ziggurat. Fast forward thousands of years through history to 1928 AD, when Leonard Woolley finally unearths the most shocking, atmospheric tomb of them all, PG 1237.
Part 1. The Great Death Pit, PG 1237. So this wasn't just a resting place for a monarch. It was a mass grave that absolutely stunned the archaeological world. And for decades, the accepted truth about what happened here was actually, well, relatively peaceful. Woolley looked at the undisturbed bodies and a large copper cauldron sitting nearby, and he proposed the theory of voluntary, drug-induced mass suicide. He figured these attendants drank a powerful poison mixed with a sedative, maybe opium or hashish, took their formal places, and just drifted off to sleep to serve their monarch in the afterlife. But new, ultra-realistic radiographic evidence tells a much darker, much more violent story. Blunt force trauma. These people didn't just peacefully fall asleep, guys. They were systematically murdered. Let's look at the evidence. Like opening up a cold case file. The crucial clues were right there in the shaft. The victims were arranged incredibly formally. They weren't just tossed in there, they were carefully dressed and posed, with almost all of them impersonating musicians, singers, and dancers. In fact, 4 or 5 exquisite lyres crafted from gold, silver, copper, and wood were found right on top of the corpses. They also found those famous intricate rams caught in a thicket statuettes. It really highlights this paramount and tragically fatal role of music and ritual in elite Sumerian funerals. They were essentially bringing the ultimate royal court performance with them into the dark. Part 2. Life in Ancient Sumer. To understand how they died, we really need to step out of the shadows of the tomb and look at how they lived. It was a remarkably vibrant and complex society. Just look at the staggering contrast in their living conditions. If you're an average citizen, which was the vast majority of people, you lived in a single-story, sun-dried mud brick home with zero plumbing. You'd have to use special washing rooms with jugs and basins. But the elite? They lived in 2-story homes with astonishingly advanced plumbing. We're talking 5,000 years ago here. They literally had indoor toilets connected to an underground drainage system running beneath the streets of the city. But again, that luxury was strictly the exception. Beyond their architecture, these folks were absolute pioneers of information. The Sumerians were among the very first people in human history to begin writing. They recorded their world by pressing a reed stylus into wet clay tablets to make wedge-shaped cuneiform marks. And to learn this, wealthy families sent their sons to the Edaba, special scribal schools for reading, writing, and math. But it wasn't exactly a relaxed learning environment. They learned under a brutal system where mistakes literally earned you a strict beating. It was harsh, for sure, but becoming a scribe was one of the most highly respected, prestigious jobs in all of Sumerian society. Part 3. The Ameneguru Monument.
Now we're shifting our focus from those small clay tablets to the massive, looming physical evidence of their power. Just let this sink in for a second. House whose foundation creates terror. That is the literal direct translation of the Sumerian name for the ziggurat of Ur. And dread is exactly what it was meant to inspire. It was a 30-meter tall skyscraper built by King Ur-Nammu, absolutely dominating the ancient city-state. It was a place of worship, sure, but more than that, it was this imposing, monolithic symbol of absolute regality and control.
So, you might be wondering, how do you build a 30-meter tall skyscraper over 4,000 years ago with absolutely no modern machinery? It's genius, actually. Step 1, brickmakers formed perfect sun-dried mud bricks. Step 2, to bind them together, they didn't just use mud, they used bitumen. That's a thick, sticky black substance that's a lot like the asphalt we use to pave our roads today. And step 3, to keep this massive, heavy structure from just collapsing under its own weight, they wove braided reeds right through the layers of brick and bitumen. Those reeds acted exactly the way modern steel cables behave inside our concrete today. Talk about ancient innovation.
And the result of that engineering is a structure with this incredibly eerie resilience. I mean, look at this history of survival. Originally built by King Ur-Nammu around 2040 BC, it was already sitting in ruins centuries later and was restored by the Neo-Babylonian king Nabonidus in the 6th century BC. Jump all the way to the modern era, and its facade and monumental staircase were partially rebuilt under Saddam Hussein in the 1980s. Then, during the Gulf War in 1991, the structure survived yet again. It was shaken by nearby explosions, and today it literally bears over 400 bullet holes from small arms fire. It has survived millennia of empires, insurgencies, and modern warfare.
Part 4. The final threat.
But despite all that survival, we have to pivot to the modern era, because there is an ultimate, silent killer creeping up on the world's first empire right now. It boils down to this: improper past restorations plus climate change equals accelerated destruction. See, the original Sumerians sourced their clay directly from the land back when the salinity, the salt level, was incredibly low. But flawed restoration practices from previous decades used materials that made these ancient structures dangerously vulnerable. Combine that with climate change drastically altering Iraq's ecosystem today, and the extreme heat is drawing immense, damaging amounts of salt right up from the earth.
It's gotten so bad that Iraqi official Haznawi recently issued this incredibly grave warning. He stated, "The salinity problem is increasing in both surface and groundwater. This will lead to the destruction of many cities that are beneath the earth." That salt is quite literally eating away at the clay-based materials. Think about it. The elaborate ancient drawings, the mighty mud brick walls that withstood thousands of years of brutal human conflict, they're now quietly dissolving from the inside out, just melting away because of the rising, salty groundwater. Which leaves us with one final, frankly haunting question to ponder. After surviving millennia of rising and falling empires, the dark brutality of ancient sacrifices, and the explosive crossfire of modern wars, will the world's first empire finally be erased by the earth itself? It's a heavy, dark thought, but it really reveals just how fragile and fleeting human civilization truly is. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the past, and I'll see you next time.